to Datacenter Changemakers Denmark, live from Datacenter Forum Copenhagen. We are so proud of being a part of actually opening the door to the data center industries in the whole of the Nordics this week. So that is really a first, and I think it's so important because the data centers have traditionally lived a very secret life. So that is really cool to be a part of. Also, it's the 9th year that we have the Data Center Forum here in Copenhagen, and there has just been a tsunami of changes, especially in the last years. So it's almost unrecognizable when you look at this industry. And I'm so excited to be hosting this. My name is Liselotte Lyngsø. I'm a futurist, but I'm also your moderator of today. Welcome to Data Center Changemakers Denmark. Data Center Changemakers is really here to help you making sense of the big transformations that is going on in society. And today we have 2 talk shows lined up for you. And this is the first one. And here we are going to touch on 2 very crucial and popular topics. One is the ESG compliance issues, which is huge hitting the data centers. And the other one is AI and the electrification of society and all the breakthroughs that are happening also in Denmark at this very moment. So very welcome. Let's dive into our first topic, legislation, regulation, demanding an ever more sustainable infrastructure. Data centers must face this daunting task of complying. And we heard there was a deadline last week?
Last week was a first deadline for reporting on your energy efficiency compliance.
And we will come back to that. Thank you for that, Dietrich. Amid this ever-growing importance of ESG, small data centers in particular are a little bit pushed with regard to put full attention to this. So they are in, you can say, a little hard situation right now. So we'll delve into that. First, though, I would like to welcome my table. Dietrich, we already had the big pleasure of hearing your keynote this morning. You are former Chief of Staff of the European Commission on Climate Action. So thank you again. And we also have you, Brian Bate, from CTS Nordics. Welcome. And you, Stefan Frenzel from DME. And last but not least, Sophia, I have the pleasure of seeing you again. Sophia Lisa Dinesen from Global Connect. So welcome all. To set the scene for our discussion, I earlier spoke with data center energy efficiency consultants John Booth, and I asked him to describe these 3 acts or directives which the EU has implemented that all data center operators need to be aware of. So let's just have a reminder of those 3.
So there are 3 main pieces of legislation. The first is the Taxonomy Climate Delegated Act. This is primarily focused on the investors and provides assurance to them that the data centers they're investing in will meet the requirements of the EU moving forward. The second piece is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and that requires qualifying organisations to publish their Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3, and any third-party Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3 applies directly to them. So if you're an organisation that uses co-location or cloud services, you should be asking them for their information, which you can then incorporate within your reporting regime. The final piece is the Energy Efficiency Directive, which is focused directly on data centres, and that requires 4 pieces of information to be sent through to the Commission. But there's a whole load of administration stuff, which actually looks remarkably similar to the EU Code of Conduct reporting regime. But the 4 pieces of information are total energy consumption, the amount of that energy that's derived from renewable energy resources, such as a power purchase agreement. Then there is the water usage, and then finally waste heat reuse.
So, John, how can data center managers address these requirements as they come into effect?
They need to have people within their organisation that really understands this legislation and to develop basically a roadmap and a strategy to actually start delivering.
So, do you have any comments to add to what John said?
Plenty.
Go ahead.
Where to start? I think our biggest concern is the CSRD. We are in financial year 25, needing to report on that directive. And as so far, the mapping is that we need to report on more than 500 data points, which is quite a load. And it's going to put a lot of strain on the organization and as well in our entire value chain, because we need to pull data sources from multiple places, I would say.
So all this compliance, all these regulations burdening the industry, is that your fault, Dietrich?
Yes, fully. I take full responsibility. That's all. And the philosophy behind the CSRD is actually that once companies start to report on all those data points, they start to understand those data points. And actually, I mean, we all know what we pay in terms of wages to our employees. And that's also a data point, and we don't have any problem with reporting on it in terms of the tax service, etc. These are all data points that are a little less known in terms of biodiversity or your water consumption, etc. So yes, that's a burden, but we should have addressed that earlier. Now it's compliance issue. I would argue that every company that starts reporting on those should also perform on those indicators, and then at some point in time, I know it doesn't sound very reassuring, but at some point in time, let's say 5 years from now, companies will embed this reporting as the usual stuff. And obviously then only the real performance starts, because then we have to perform on all those indicators, making it better.
Sophia, you want to comment on that?
Yes. Because I think when I say burden, it's not necessarily meant as a negative thing. I think what will help us in the industry is that we're going to be speaking the same language. It's going to create a lot more transparency than what we've seen before. So I actually welcome this. I think the hardest task is to get an overview and start reporting, but the coming years will be much easier. So I'm actually welcoming this.
And how well has the industry adapted so far, in your point of view?
It's very early days. So
Do you want to give any grades?
I think it's too early to tell. We haven't seen many report on the CSRD yet. The ones that have, I think, have done a really good job. Next year you will see Global Connect's first CSRD report, which is a trial year. We already know what we will report on, and we have a good clarity on the data points as well. But the ones that have done, I think they've done a super good job.
Brian, will people or the organizations be ready for January 1st, 2025?
Not everyone, I don't think so. It is a trial period, and people are building sort of new accounting and reporting practices at the moment. And it's going to be a trial period for many years going forward. I think, down the line, you will see more precise reporting. But I agree with you, Dietrich. It's an ambition, and it's all about being transparent about this so that we can benchmark ourselves. And by the way, we should embrace it. Honestly, this is a business opportunity, as I see it, for businesses. It is already, and it will become more of a competitive element. So if you embrace it, if you're ambitious about it, it has a competitive edge to it.
And in the Nordics, usually we tend to be fairly compliant or good at being compliant, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I've spoken with Datacenter, the agency for digital government, and they're very ambitious about, how they are sort of implementing CSRD. And yes, there are some sort of some recommendations there, but down the line, they will become more and more hard regulated issues or elements, as I see it.
Another thing now that I have you, Brian, what about the customers of data centers? Will they be ready, because they are in this loop as well?
Oh, absolutely, and this is interesting, and I think it was already said, CSRD is, and I think John Booth said it, that relates to not only the operator, but also the operator's customers, because they're going to be requiring data from the operators to report on their own scope 2 and 3 elements. And that is a hard thing to do. And you said 500 data points, it could be even more going forward.
I need to introduce you on stage as well, Stefan Frenzel, because in a sense, I guess you are a first mover. At least last year at our Stockholm event, you told us about the Energy Efficiency Act in Germany, making Germany a leader in this regulatory stringency. It was implemented on January 1st, 2024.
Yes.
So what is the status now?
Yes, that's right. Surprisingly, Germany is leading this process. We are not behind this time. So there is, since 9 months it's in place. There is a transition period. So from my humble view, knowing the industry very well, a lot of particularly the smaller ones and medium-sized ones are struggling, a bit overwhelmed with it. Of course, there are many things. I think the key things we know, the reporting needs to be done, the implementation of the energy-saving plans, and of course, making use of the excess heat, 10% first and then 20%. I get addressed many times because we have been preaching as a consultancy company how to make use of the excess heat, and now we're getting all the approaches and from people, because they don't know how to do this. So after 9 months, I must say, luckily there is a transition period. And to be fair and open, also the fines are also really moderate. I think if they're not really compliant and they're not meeting the deadlines, a fine is 5,000 euros or something like that. However, it's a good thing. I have also controversial discussions within the industry. In other countries, and I like this legislation as a framework, and there is also the obligation now to do something, not to do this greenwashing and talks. Now we have these deadlines, and we need to live up to that.
We have some children at home, and they want us to do something. So, what would you say, competitive edge or burden, looking at this till now?
So as I'm pushing since a couple of years or many years, I think it's a competitive edge now. And other countries, this is my strong belief, will jump on that. Really using this European directive and put it in national law. Let's say other regions, if you look at the North America or Asia, they're leading with AI, they're leading with liquid cooling. And here we can say, and I think we can proudly say this, we are really in the driving seat when it comes to sustainability, especially when it comes to our industry, how to run data center sites as sustainable as possible, really making use of the heat rejection, not blowing it into the environment. So this is, I think, is a good thing.
So Brian, do you agree with this as a competitive element? You touched upon it before, and Didrik, you touched upon it this morning, saying that we're on this path.
Yeah, as I said this morning, if you hang back into the regulation, just be compliant and nothing else, you will lose out on the game. So the whole regulation is meant to incentivize companies to do better. And I applaud the German government in this case, because indeed the energy efficiency directive has to be implemented in all 27 countries. They're all implemented a little differently, to my dreadful conclusion. But the Germans have not just implemented reporting obligations, but also performance obligations, the 10% and then 10%, 20% reuse. And that's obviously where you really start to make a difference.
And to that note there, I totally agree with you. You talked about a license to operate this morning, and I totally agree with that. It is a license to operate in this world. If you don't know how to deal with this, you're going to lose out, and you're going to be swept up by that van that you talked about this morning. So you better get started, you better be ambitious, you better embrace it, because otherwise you're going to be caught up with this. And I think, operators, there are different types of data center operators. There are, the hyperscalers, there are wholesale colo providers, and there are also retail colo providers, and they are somewhat challenged in different ways around this. But anyways, all of them, they need to embrace this and, start to, ensure that they can report on this and account for it. And another thing that I'd like to bring up is auditing. We're talking about how do we audit all of this? That's going to be the next big challenge, because it's so complex with 500 data points. How do you audit all of that? So there are challenges, but you need to start to build practices around it.
Thank you for that. Sophia, on top of that, we have this exponential curve with AI taking up a lot of energy usage in the data centers. We'll come back to the AI part in a moment. But do you have any ideas on how are the data centers going to comply with that, and can they live up to it? And are there any technologies in horizons for them that they can help them doing all this transition?
So in terms of the AI wave coming over us, it's a tsunami. We're seeing more and more demands, and we're also seeing tenders out there. The data center providers are looking into how we can follow along with this trend, but we're also talking to the local municipalities on the energy sector to get a grid up and running so we can actually get the energy that we need, and it needs to be green, because we're also seeing that the demands come from both AI, but they need green energy to support the energy usage in the data centers. We're also seeing the digital infrastructure needing to ramp up quite heavily. We need more fiber routes, we need more redundancy, and we need to secure the critical infrastructure around the AI wave as well.
Are we going to manage, or are we looking into this bottleneck situation?
It's probably a hen and the egg issue. I think we're gonna see that the infrastructure is probably gonna lag a little bit behind the need for the AI data centers. But we need to also have an increased investment into that. It's gonna come follow along. I'm not so super concerned about that, because it is on the politicians' mind. We know that every country in the EU is concerned about this and want to follow the trend, because we're also seeing that now we're in Scandinavia. AI's data centers and connectivity also comes with larger investments into other industries as well. So if we do not follow along here, we will lose out on other business potential.
Thank you. Stefan, another thing, just returning to John Booth, he was mentioning this scope 3. Can you please repeat for the audience here and online?
Yes.
What does it entail?
Yeah, so basically, yeah, there are different scopes, scope 1, 2, and 3. These are part of the so-called greenhouse protocol. We designed for companies, and they have these 3 scopes, yeah. And scope 1, as everyone is knowing, scope 1 are the direct emissions, yeah, created, owned by yourself or created by yourself and controlled by yourself. Scope 2 are the indirect emissions, so basically the energy you purchase. And scope 3, and this is a big chunk in the data center side, these are also including all the indirect emissions, but really also those emissions from the supply chain, and also the ones you create. So there is an upstream and also a downstream, yeah. And as I mentioned, scope 3, this is really the big challenge of this decade. Scope 3 really is in the data center side, 99.5% of the IT servers are really scope 3. Yeah, so this is something we need to work on. If you look at the building, and I like the discussion this morning, from North, for example, they're also building sustainable data center sites. The building as such only accounts for 1%. So even if you build a sustainable data center site, you still have around 99% of scope 3. So the result would be really looking into circular economy, yeah, really using second life servers, and also making use of the excess heat. Yeah, this is something really we pushing in the industry, because if you're using this, let's say the heat we use, this is the downstream. Someone else can use this. Let's say a building can use this, the kindergarten, a school, you name it. So they say the user, they will decrease their fossil fuel consumption. Yeah, so they can offset actually their CO2 emissions, and also the data center side can also become net zero. Yeah, so they can also reduce their CO2 emissions. So it's a win-win game on both ends. Yeah, so this is something which we also be pushing big time.
Brian, do you see these complexities as well?
Absolutely. Scope 3 is a huge challenge, and it seems, close to impossible, really. Honestly, it requires so much transparency into your entire supply chain, and your supply chain should provide you with all the data so that you can incorporate it in your reporting and report to your own customers. So it's huge, complex. And you won't be able to get all that data from all your supply chain partners, because some of them, they are not under the directive yet. So it is a complex. So I would recommend that you would look into, there are data services out there like, this is not a commercial, but like Reduce. They actually do a lot of data collection points for servers and all these different things that would help you to come up with reliable reporting data. So perhaps you could look into that as you're looking into your supply chain as well.
Sophia?
Just one comment, and I agree. I think in terms of Scope 3, our strategy is to enter into partnerships. So we need to support each other on getting the right data. I'm not sure that we can necessarily succeed in the first couple of years, but if we enter into a strong partnership with our suppliers, then we can get a long way.
I would also argue. I heard this a lot also in the past when Scope 3 was sort of the overwhelming issue that paralyzed all progress. I always say your Scope 3 is somebody else's Scope 1 emission, and so if everyone complies, we should move towards the optimal endpoint, which is net zero for everyone in terms of energy and in terms of circularity too. So don't get overwhelmed or indulge yourself into the issue that indeed most of your emissions are not controlled by yourself. They're controlled by somebody else. And that somebody else is your customer or your supplier. So you have a relationship that you can use.
I like this picture of interconnectivity. Before we move on to the AI part, I want to address another area which I think is really going to hit the data center industry quite hard, and that's the transparency. All these data are going to create a complete transparent organization. And do you think you're ready for that, or can that create some kind of political backlash or public backlash? Stefan, any ideas?
I think
everybody?
Sorry, I interrupted you, but
No.
a great tool is, apart from circular economy gear, is also using, there are really some solutions in place like DCIM really software, data center infrastructure management software, where you can really, and it's a complex calculation if you really look down the supply chain, to do the calculation and talk about circular economy servers, they are not destroyed, yeah? So if you have this kind of tool, they're really then also reported measured in that tool. Also the second life will be there, and you can really monitor what's happening from the point it has been produced until it really is end of life at some point. So you're extending it and you have it really transparent there. And transparency is what you also said. This is creating trust in the industry, not distrust. And people, or let's say players in the industry who are doing their homework, so to speak, they are more than welcome to have this transparent in these kind of platforms. And those who do some greenwashing, they will be reluctant. Mm-hmm. But they can also be used as role models and benchmark towards others.
So we'll have kind of digital twin in an Internet of Things. We can see the whole thing happening in their lifetime, and everybody who's doing greenwashing will be found out. Is that where we are?
This is the end game, so to speak, and this is what we also push in big time here. Yeah.
Thank you so much for attending this round.
Thank you. Okay.
Brian, I need you to stay on the table. And I need Torbjørn Minne from RISE, if he's in the room, to sit down with us.
There.
Here he is. He was in the middle of a much more important conversation in the audience.
Okay.
Hi, how are you? Okay, later in the show we'll have a critical analysis of Denmark's AI competitiveness from bulk data centers with Christian and Rasmus from NVIDIA. But first, let's discuss AI with Brian Bate again. Thank you for still being with us. Thank you very much for joining us, Torbjørn Minne from RISE, the Research Institute of Sweden. Erik Gjesdal, we already said hello to you this morning briefly from Schneider Electric. and Nadia Carlson from, it's called Danish Center for AI Innovation. We have to get used to this new center. We are so proud to have you. Congratulations with your new position, and thanks for coming to Denmark. I'll start with you, because which part of this journey is a dream come true for you?
Oh, so many parts. I mean, the center itself, the fact that this was created to bring more AI to Denmark is amazing. And then, of course, the reason the Danish Center for AI Innovation exists is to run and operate Gefion, which is going to be one of the largest AI supercomputers in the world. It's definitely going to be the biggest in Denmark, very big even by European and global standards. And it's just a privilege to have this role and guide it.
Thank you for taking it on, Nadia. And Gefion, can you tell us a little more about this supercomputer? What is the timeline? I see you have a lot of pilots demands out there.
Yes.
What are you expecting? When do we see the first results?
Yes, so we're not just accelerating computing, we're also accelerating timelines with this project. So this was announced only in March, the strategic collaboration with NVIDIA to build the computer. And the parts of the computer have already arrived in Denmark, and we expect it to be fully operational by end of year. And so we are now working with select customers to pilot some use cases by the end of the year. And so it's a very critical time for us, having most of the computer in the data center already. And we're really looking forward to be able to turn it on and see what it does.
Can you restart? I saw some of the topics: healthcare, life sciences. What more topics do you have? Have you created some kind of prioritized list?
Yeah, so one of the things about the AI supercomputer is we're really open to everybody. So we do want to get that diversity of use cases. And the point is people can get very creative about what they can do with AI, having access to this dedicated capability at scale. The computer is massively huge. It's 1,528, each 100 GPUs. So it can do a lot, and we really want people to think big about what they can do with AI. But we did identify 4 areas that we think will be highly strategic for Denmark and that we will collaborate even more closely with NVIDIA on. And those 4 areas are quantum computing, green transition, healthcare, and life sciences.
Great areas. Brian, Eric, and Torbjørn, how important is this supercomputer project for Denmark? Brian, will you go first?
Oh, I think it's massively important. We need to prove that we are capable of, becoming or proving our point of becoming an AI hub as a whole. And that's not only for Denmark, but I think that's in general for the Nordics. We have so much potential for us around that, and I think that is an ambition we should pursue. And Gefion project is a really good start, I would say.
And Torbjørn, how do you think it compares to the rest of the Nordics? Because I know you have ambitious projects everywhere.
Yeah, there is ambitious projects all over the world, so in the rest of the Nordics as well. So you have the Lumi supercomputer in Finland, of course, and in Sweden there is a number of initiatives. So yes, all of this is important.
But will you say it becomes a part of the critical national infrastructure that has to be in place? Is it kind of a need to have these days?
It's a need, it must to have, but at the same time the question is, okay, how are we going to cope with it? Here we're sitting listening to the previous session. Okay, are you ready to report? So that's that's the question. Is AI and green transition going hand in hand? I don't know. Yeah. I have said in another session last week that no. Sorry, no. I usually take the realistic standpoint, okay?
Yeah. As a futurist, I do hope that the green transition projects coming out of your supercomputer is going to solve some of our issues.
Yes, we hope so too. And for us, the sustainability aspect was designed in from the start, and that was a big consideration also when we picked the data center that the computer is sitting in. So we are using 100% renewable energy. And there's many ways to make AI more energy efficient. One of them is the data center, but also the types of chips that we use. The H100s are some of the most efficient processors on the market right now. And then we do hope to help customers even further with optimizing their workloads so that we are as efficient as we can in that regard.
Any comments, Eric, with
Yeah.
regard to this supercomputer?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think one thing is we don't necessarily know what comes out of this this research, so that to me is very exciting. We can have an idea of what comes out of it and that we should invest in it, but ultimately we could be positively surprised by the result. Another thing is that I think we can also gain a lot of experience about how the infrastructure around AI can be built up most efficiently. Not, we're focusing on the end result, but there's a lot to learn from how we built up the supercomputer, how it functions, how we can make it more energy efficient, which I think we can learn a lot from, which will be relevant for large-scale deployments across the region.
Brian?
Yeah, so in my role at CTS, my perspective is, designing and building these data centers in which these AI deployments are running. And what we're seeing is that AI is going to be reshaping data centers going forward in terms of their infrastructure designs, in terms of spatial designs. We're going to see changes in how these things are built and operated. So AI will have an impact on how data centers look and how they're operated going forward, and of course with sustainability in mind, because that is a must have. In that sense.
Absolutely agree.
Torbjørn,
Yes.
you're the realistic one of us. Can the advancement of AI today still be seen as this revolution, or do you think we are now moving into a more incremental phase?
Well, I will talk about this later today.
I know you will,
yes,
but
yes,
just
yes.
give us the highlights.
Yeah, there has been, every 30 years has been a kind of a transformative point, and we have just passed one, in the research, and now it's coming out in use. So yes, it's an inflection point, it is, but then it will change a lot of things, and I think I will talk about that as well. We need to rethink how we do things now in the infrastructure side of data centers. That's what we need to do.
Can you just give one sneak peek of your afternoon
It doesn't.
presentation?
Yeah,
just
it will,
one key point.
The things that we all talk about today will not work tomorrow.
Okay, and you can hear more about that 2:30 this afternoon.
I can maybe say a few things about it as well, because it's something that we see clearly, because we are on the infrastructure side of this. We are being pushed to develop solutions that work in this new paradigm, which I totally agree with you said, Brian, that there are different demands that we have to construct for. We made actually some reference designs together with NVIDIA to try and make an idea of what this will look like. I'm not saying it's the end, final answer to this question. It's not. Frankly speaking, we are trying to iterate through some of these challenges, but I think we have a kind of rough idea of what data center infrastructure will look like with these new challenges, with a lot of unknowns, I think, to come.
So if you're here and now want to give some advice to all these operators, do they need to adjust existing data centers, or do we have to scrap it here all and basically create new ones?
They have to rebuild.
Rebuild. Okay.
Well, I think there's some different scenarios. You have a scenario where you have something existing, and you can, I think, make something manageable from an existing site, but you have to make some fundamental changes. We described that actually in some of those reference architectures that we made. This was different scenarios. Either you're building a new site or you're building from something you already have. So I think both can be done, but definitely it's easier if you're starting with a clean slate. That's for sure.
So AI and liquid cooling are often mentioned in the same sentence, but air cooling might still.
Yeah, of course, it's a part of the answer. I mean, even in the most dense scenarios, high dense rack scenarios, you're still going to have a significant need for air cooling, and sometimes we forget that in this.
Absolutely. I mean, AI is on the subject here, but there's so many other workloads out there that needs to be handled and managed. So I do agree with you. So what we're realizing is that we have low to medium density systems, but now we have extreme density systems. And that's really hard to operate in a single facility. So maybe we need to look ahead and say, okay, are we going to build different designs and different ways to support these different types of needs, because it's probably hard to accommodate everything under the same roof.
So smaller rack footprints somehow.
Yeah, definitely. Just one thing I want to say, that I think we're in a very interesting position here in the Nordics, because when I talk to my colleagues in other parts of the world, or especially other parts of Europe, there's a lot of talk of AI, but they haven't seen their customers come and ask for this type of deployment yet. While I'm seeing it almost every day, we're hearing about a need for this today, because they're designing for customers that need it today, while other parts of the world are not seeing. So we might get experiences, for example, from the supercomputer and from other projects that will be very influential in defining how this looks around the world. I think it's a very interesting situation we're in.
I can absolutely echo that. So we're seeing a huge demand coming into the Nordics, all countries in the Nordics, for AI deployments, and we're talking, it's actually moving from megawatts to gigawatts, these discussions as we are looking ahead. So that's quite massive. And these deployments that we're talking about today are 80, 120, 250, 500 megawatt installations. I mean, just 5 years ago, we talked about 10 megawatt being a big deal. Mm-hmm. So it's escalating at a speed that is, it's hard to grasp.
We talk a lot about hardware in this industry, but actually the software part might become even more important.
Very important.
It's definitely important, and for us, that's why we partner with NVIDIA, is because they have amazing processors, but we're also getting access to the NVIDIA software stack for enterprise, and that's a huge value for our customers. And when the market research was being done to justify GIFIA and figure out what were the needs of the community, both came up. One of them was access to GPUs at scale. But then one of the reasons that people really liked our choice of NVIDIA was also they were already using some of that software in many cases. So they liked having access to both the hardware and the software. But the software side is really key to extract the value of the processors.
So regarding AI, where do you see the big potential for this industry? Is there something you can see already that they're not aware of? The realistic Torbjørn, is that something you know about where there's some hope coming ahead?
So for me, it's interesting because I come from the world of quantum and AI. So for me, it's not even a question of is AI disruptive and going to impact very positively many industries, including how we design chips, how we design data centers, how we design infrastructure. So I'm definitely an optimist in that sense. What I'm really excited to see is industries that have not adopted AI at scale now starting to do so. So companies that have only experimented with things like AI chatbots, now thinking, well, if we have this compute capability, now can we really think bigger about how AI can transform the whole business? So those are the types of use cases that I've been talking about with a few customers, and we hope to accelerate those even more.
So even more clever AI. Looking a little bit ahead, I'm really curious to this quantum because we see the huge competition, not least between China and the US. How far are we? I mean, because the first thing I heard was 2032, and then somebody said, well, we have Niels Bohr Institute here in Copenhagen, and Novo Nordic Fonden, and maybe already in 2026. I mean, and it's all about cryptizing our security and the rest. So how far are we now?
Yeah. Well, I've been in quantum long enough that I know not to give a precise date. But I will say that there has been a lot of acceleration of the research just in the last couple of years. The key point was the discussion moving from physical qubits, so a metric that is really inexact in terms of the power of the computing, to now what they call logical qubits. And this really tells you more about the types of calculations you can run on quantum computers. And if you look at that metric, there has been just great progress in the community, both from the large companies. Google, Amazon just published a paper, but also the startups in that space, Quantinuum and Atom Computing, which is now in Denmark. So there's a lot of activity, and I think a lot of hope that even though we don't know what a quantum computer will look like, we know now that there is absolutely a way that it can perform really well.
So What do you three guys think about that?
Yeah, I went to school with good old Professor Bernard Widrow, the founder of the first neural network, Perceptron. So I've seen the different steps of the AI development, and of course this Transformer Models 2017 paper is transformative, so double meaning. But the thing is that we are seeing now that we increase the infrastructure side of the data center, but the CMOS technology is will continue to take most of the energy. So we will continue to have this 80% IT, 20% facility, but that's not the case for quantum. Then you have to be prepared for a complete new change again. Then we're going to have 80-20. 80% of the energy will go to the cooling.
Wow.
So that will be an interesting
and
future for the young ones. I will be long gone.
Until we know exactly what type of quantum computer is the best, we don't really know the demands for cooling because the different types have very different ways of working. Superconducting qubits require helium cooling. So that's very different than for a photonic system, which will require a lot less cooling. So I think the premise that data centers will look entirely different when quantum computers are here is absolutely true, but we really can't make predictions about what they will need and what they will look like. And the other thing I will mention is everything we're talking about in terms of improvements of data center infrastructure now for AI or for more advanced compute workloads will still be needed because quantum computers are not expected to replace the computing that we have now.
It's an add-on.
It's an add-on, exactly.
Yes. Eric, you were having your hands up on this.
There was so many things to grab onto there, but I think one thing that can bring this a little bit full circle is that you can actually develop, and we already have developed software that are AI-based that can be used to optimize the energy efficiency at data centers. So it almost brings this a little bit full circle because there are softwares that can look at all of your different energy vectors in a data center, regardless if it's electrical or thermal energy, and optimize how that's being used in connection with the local environment, either local grid or local district heating or whatever it might be. So there's AI tools that are being developed in data centers that are actually being used already today to optimize data centers' energy usage. So that to me is
Are we talking line or exponential?
Like we heard her earlier, the human mind can't understand the exponential, so I wouldn't be able to tell.
Okay, that was a good answer. You, Brian?
Yeah, so it's all about innovation. So, and it's really hard to look into that crystal ball and say when it's just going to happen, really. So I think, as we're looking at as long as we can see, we do see the changes in the data center infrastructures and the designs, et cetera, and of course, I think it was mentioned earlier, we're seeing air moving to liquid, and perhaps we're going to be seeing immersive or submersive cooling, and all these different types of technologies coming into the data centers will also reshape how data centers look. So as we're looking ahead, we sort of promote the idea of you need to standardize. You need to think modular. You need to think flexible and scalable and replaceable. Because if these investments that we're doing in these big facilities are so huge, we're talking billions or millions or billions of dollars. And of course, we're talking about long-term depreciation schemes in a world where technology moves faster than that. So those investments that you make in these facilities, you have to justify those. So you better start standardizing, modularizing, so that you can actually replace along the way. And I think that's very important so that you're ready for that innovation when it comes, so you're not stuck with a facility that only serves one purpose. You know what I mean?
So keeping your options open. Torbjørn?
Yes, I'm usually known as the optimist. But yesterday,
is this good?
So last week at DCD Connect, of course, I had to take a more realistic, a little bit pessimistic standpoint just to get the debate going. Are we debating or are we just agreeing on everything?
We are debating.
Okay. So the first thing, to know the future, you need to look at the history. And this is very true for this, because we can look at the bipolar development that happened many years ago. Maybe the oldest in the room might remember the IBM liquid-cooled machines. Look at that history. Who thought that raised floor was coming back? So look at these things if you want to look into the future. AI, using AI for optimization, we have been there, tried a lot of things. The problem with that is to get a good transformer model, you need a lot of data, and you need the data to be all over the place, not just at the best operational point. You need the whole space of data for a data center. So to create that data, you have to run your data center really bad to get the data that you can train the model on. So, and no one wants to do that. So you will not going to have the data for optimizing you need to work on smaller pieces for transformer models of the data. You cannot optimize the whole data center. So smart grid, looking at the weather, that yes, is a good case. But optimizing, kind of trying to think that, okay, I will run a big AI model. It's a dream to find that operational sweet spot. No, you will not do it.
Nadia, we have to round off, and I just want to end on a really happy note. Welcoming you to Denmark, welcoming you to host this supercomputer, and please end up with saying something happy here. At the that the future is bright, that the data center is going to
The future
survive.
is bright. Researchers are so excited about this computer coming online. I can at least say that. And that is people from both academia but also businesses. As you mentioned, we've had this call for potential use cases just to get going and get a sense. And the interest was just immense. It completely flooded our inboxes, which is a great thing. So I think we don't know all of the answers in terms of how this will be used and how it will best help society. But seeing all of the different ideas that people have makes me very hopeful.
Thank you. We look so much forward to following the project. And thank you to everybody, also the realists. Let's give them a big hand. Now we are moving into a discussion on Denmark's AI competitiveness. I think we had a great warm-up for this discussion in the previous one, inviting Nadia on stage, but also hearing about the data centers, the cannot perspectives. And now with me, I have Christian Kofod Solheim from Bulk Data Centers, and I've met you many times before, Christian, so welcome back. And Rasmus Bisgaard, you are from NVIDIA. Very welcome to you. Together we will explore the readiness to compete on this AI global landscape, both from a macro and a business perspective. There is a saying right now in the US and China, there is a lot of AI but no regulation, and whereas in Europe there's a lot of regulation but almost no AI. I don't know if that's taking it to the extreme, but Rasmus, we just talked about the Danish Center of AI Innovation, Gefion, the supercomputer powered by NVIDIA. How much do you think it's a milestone for Denmark?
It's without a doubt a massive quantum leap for Denmark. I think without the foundation, we will be even further behind, both what we see in Sweden and in Norway, but also especially when we see in China and the US. I think it's very, very true what you're saying about China and the US is going all in on this. I hear quite often that European is being compared to the judge in a football match, and I've watched quite a lot of football matches, and I've never seen a judge win a football match. So we need to have an alternative way. I think we're doing the right thing about thinking about ethics and data security and these kind of things, but it cannot be the only thing. We also need to talk about investment. And thank God we have the Novo Nordics Foundation here in Denmark taking that leap together with IFO. Without them, we have been even further behind.
Yeah, and the first pilot project is going to be open data, right? There's not going to be so much focus on security, so people are only bringing pilot projects that can...
Yeah, I will let them comment on that, but that's the idea on the first step, is having friendly users that have open source project where they can go in and test it out. But they have a complete roadmap for how to run the next couple of years.
So cool. Christian, what do you see as being the key strengths and weaknesses in Denmark with regard to our AI infrastructure so far? And also, I guess, the workforce that has to empower this whole transition.
I think in terms of workforce, we're quite capable of getting. I could say that China and US are winning and Europe is losing, and then the Nordics are losing in Europe. So we are very far behind. And if we look to Sweden, they are leading this AI race, so to say, and they have than any other Nordic country.
Why do you think Sweden is ahead on this game?
I think in general, then Sweden have been ahead on technology. Yeah, we have seen Spotify, a lot of other things coming out of Sweden, and I think IKEA, yeah, maybe, yeah. But again, I think they have been far ahead on the infrastructure side all along. So I think that started sort of, is it infrastructure that started or is it the businesses? But you need the infrastructure actually to start the business. And now we see that AI with coming out of the latest AI winter now again and seeing that everything is possible and the hardware and the compute power is affordable, then we'll see a lot more projects coming up. I do, however, see that Nordic countries, Norway and Denmark specifically, is a lot of ChatGPT. It's sort of what we see as AI, and maybe Copilot is being tested. So that's where we basically stop.
So these LLM models, which is accessible to anybody, but not these big projects, is that? So Rasmus, Norway, Sweden, Iceland. You didn't mention Finland here in my script. They're quite far ahead as well, aren't they? Or
they are quite aggressive up there as well. Like Sweden and Finland, they have had a massive supercomputer for years now. So not only they have actually the technology companies with Nokia and Spotify, both Finland and especially Sweden is really good at attracting venture capital as well. They have a very active investor culture in Sweden. We like that in Denmark as well. So
why do we like that in Denmark? Where do you see the hindrance for this?
I actually don't know, but every time we come up with some good ideas and some good business, they have a tendency of moving out, either to London or to the Bay Area. And a lot of it has to do with actually attracting the right capital.
So it doesn't have to do with the workforce that is lacking or the experts?
Actually think we have quite a good base of talent here in Denmark. We are lacking venture capital, we are lacking know-how and compute. And now we have the compute. We can see stuff happening in Europe, especially with Scaleway. They're trying to do some of the same stuff as the Novo Nordics Foundation how can we do an incubator to actually keep some of the startups here in Europe and give them access to some of these massive supercomputers. So we have Mistral there. The Danish startup, really great example, Synthesia, started up in Denmark and moved to London and now running on Scaleway in France.
So we start, but then we move out. So we need to do something in order to keep the insights, I guess.
Yeah, I think we need to work on the entire pipeline, both generating more startups, but also when we actually succeed on generating these startups that have some value to them, then ensure that we can keep them in Denmark.
And how can data centers, you are also responsible for them, so to speak, Christian, how can they enable this process or strengthen this whole process?
Yeah, I think in Denmark, as we are in now, then almost all companies working with AI solutions for themselves are working in a public cloud. So it's Azure, it's AWS, or it's Google mostly. Scaleway was mentioned as well. But we have to take things into our own hands if we really want to succeed in this, because there are a lot of things. There's the price element, there's the intellectual property element. What do you actually develop on your solutions? Yeah. So just on the question again.
Okay. Yeah. But this was also on the data center.
Yeah.
How can they? We heard in the morning speech that you don't really have a political voice out there, especially not in the EU. So they have a blind ankle. They don't know enough about you, and still you're you can say the backbone for delivering all this data in the right and secure manner, also in the environmental manner. Because can we do this transition? I know sustainability is on your mind as well. Can we do it in the Nordic without?
I think talking about the big AI workloads, we are seeing a big move to, there's north of Sweden, there's Iceland, and there's Norway right now, due to the electricity mix that we actually see and the cost of power. The data centers in Denmark are more either hyperscaler or traditional small-scale co-location. We see at North coming in now. Want to change that as well. I think we need more Danish players to step up their game and buy more compute power themselves to see our data center industry strive in this sense. Because right now, UK, Germany, the US are looking other places.
And I think the data center, and especially the placement of the data center, is important. We see a huge tendency towards sovereign AI. The Novo Nordics Foundation is once again a great example. They were really, really keen on it. It has to be in Denmark. We cannot place that in a data center on Iceland or in the Netherlands or in Norway. It has to be in Denmark. And we see that popping up all around the world. We see Tata doing it in India, Swisscom doing it in Switzerland, Fastweb in Italy, Telenor in Norway. So we see this, we call it sovereign AI, and it's sovereign AI.
Yeah,
it's
good word.
Especially in this climate, the trust is becoming less and less, and even really key players in our societies is Microsoft and AWS. We have quite a lot of compliance issues with these guys, especially when they come to the public sector. So it's important where the data center is located and where the GPU is located.
So Novo and the public sector as a minimum.
As a minimum, but we see the same in banking, insurance, everything that has to do with the place of data centers.
I think we hear a lot about projects that are sort of in the pipeline, but they don't know how to do it because they're not going to invest in a supercomputer themselves. Novo Nordisk is probably not going to let them in on their supercomputer, and then they can do it in. So I think there is some chicken egg stories out there as well.
Yeah. I'm also asked to ask you, Rasmus, all these high density processors. Does NVIDIA have anything in the pipeline to make it consuming a little less power?
I think it's not the right place to announce the new series of GPUs, but I think we're doing quite a lot when it comes to power consumption, a lot more than the rest of the world can say. A great example is the new Blackwell series. Running a ChatGPT prompt on that one compared to the Pascal that's 8 years old is 45,000 more energy efficient. I don't think we have that anywhere else in the world. My Mercedes cannot drive 45,000 times longer on a gallon of fuel. Energy production and all the other things, 45,000 is quite a lot. It's the key metric every time we come out with a new series. How is the power performance ratio? And it needs to go up because everybody's using more and more AI, so we really see it exploding.
And let's just move you a few years into the future. Your arms over the head, you are so happy. We really succeeded with the AI strategy, and it all came to Rasmus and Christian sitting here in 2024. What happened?
I think Mario Draghi and his report is a key element in that. If it's actually starting realizing that we are lagging behind and we need investment, especially on a European level, in order to keep up. We are competing with Chinese that is putting a lot of tech companies driving it, NVIDIA including. So if we need something to really start, we need to have it starting in EU. I think we have something unique in the Nordics where we have quite a lot of trust between the Swedes and Norway and Iceland. So I think we have quite a unique area here with a nice data infrastructure where we can do AI in the right way and show the rest of the
Nordic speaking with one voice?
The Nordic speaking one voice thing could do something really, really unique. Now we have RISE and the Novo Nordics Foundation. We have AI Milliarden in Norway. We have quite a lot of knowledge about running data centers in the Nordics as well. So I think we can do something really unique in the Nordics if we can talk with a common voice on this, where we're not only talking regulation, but we're also having an aggressive approach to it.
I think, companies and public institutes are realizing that they need to buy and build infrastructure for their own needs if they want to have an AI strategy. Because GPUs will get harder and harder to use as more and more use cases will go into production. So we need to invest to like you invest in a factory to build a car. You need to invest in a data platform that actually can scale for your needs.
And I think also priority is important to see what should Europe live off on 10, 15 years. We spend quite a lot on farming and farming support, 420 million Danish. That's skip that for a year and buy open air, and then we are in the race again. So it's a question about priorities.
Cool. So get your priorities straight out there. With that final note, I would like to thank my two guests here at the table for their insights. I would like to thank my audience here in Copenhagen and all you who are participating online. Let's give them a big hand of applause. And do join us again at 4 o'clock this afternoon for the second episode of today's Changemakers, where we'll focus on energy availability and investment, hybrid IT and subsea data centers. See you this afternoon.